Hey guys, you're watching Our Pagan Opinions, and I am Thorn, your Thursday host. This week we are talking about spirituality and childhood, and I think the question was, what was your religious upbringing like? What tradition were you raised with? And why did you leave it, if that's the case? And like some of the other hosts thus far, my religious upbringing was non-existent. I was raised in a purely secular household, and I think that's pretty unusual in the United States. Most people come up with something, even if it's not what people call a practicing religion. I mean, they come up as being nominally something. People often have ideas about the notion of some kind of godhead, or they come up knowing the meaning of Christmas or something, all of those things that are at least nominally religious, and I really didn't have any of that. I've always attributed it to the fact that I'm an Army brat. Both of my parents are officers in the Army, and I don't know, I sort of figured that as I got older, I didn't think about these things when I was little, but as I got older, I sort of figured that the reason why religion wasn't a thing was because, my parents are both veterans, and especially with my dad, I don't know, I think maybe there's something about killing people that just makes you a little bit less inclined to be religious, or maybe more inclined, I don't know, this is purely anecdotal, but that's just sort of what I always thought, especially in high school. It just really wasn't a topic. And I remember in middle school, towards the end of middle school, when it was time for, the Catholic kids were getting confirmed, and the Jewish kids were having their bar bat mitzvahs, all of the rites of passage that happen for some traditions around that age. And suddenly I was getting invited to bar mitzvahs and confirmations, etc. And I never knew what was going on. I mean, they were parties, which was great, and there was always this boring rite of some sort where you sat in these seats, and no one really told you what was going on, and a lot of the times, the other kids at least didn't seem to care, and then we would just have a big party afterwards. So that was really my full experience with religion growing up. It's been interesting being in religious studies now, because I think it gives me a more unique perspective, in that I'm not approaching other traditions in terms of relative to my own tradition, just because my own tradition is, it's not that it's not ingrained, it is ingrained, but it's not ingrained in the same way that I think a lot of small children are ingrained in some traditions, when they're brought up a particular way. I mean, I can take a step back from Wicca, and I can understand, okay, this is what this means, and this is why we do this, and this is its history. Whereas, your average child who was brought up Catholic, etc., can't necessarily do that. They haven't been given, or they don't have the mental faculties yet to step back and view their religious traditions as something that's been taught to them, that isn't just necessarily a given in the world for other people. Anyway, I didn't have any tradition to leave. I started practicing Wicca as best I could when I was a young teenager. And I say as best I could because, as some of you know, I'm a traditionalist, and I think that I don't have any sort of problem with so-called eclectic Wicca, etc. I mean, I think all of these are Wiccan traditions, certainly as far as I'm concerned. But that said, there are some pretty significant differences between British traditional forms of Wicca and then so-called American forms of Wicca, or eclectic Wicca. So anyway, I was doing the best that I could when I was young, and I was essentially waiting to get old enough so that I could start formally seeking a traditional group. And my approach was very, I don't know, it was very slow. It was gradual. I got into it when I was 13 with a couple of girlfriends who were just, it was 1996, okay, guys? And for those of you who were around in 1996, hi, Oliver. Oliver was not around in 1996, so he didn't get to see The Craft when it came out and was in theaters, but he would have liked it too. But anyway, The Craft had come out, right? And this is so embarrassing, but I'm telling you guys this. And we all went to see The Craft, and I just always liked spooky movies, and I was always really into like fairy tales and magic and, you know, unicorns and wizards and all the stuff that so many people who grow up to be pagans are into. But these other two friends of mine, we got kind of swept up, and one girl who stopped being our friend shortly thereafter because she was kind of kooky, she decided that we were going to be witches and we were going to start a coven. And anyway, you know where the story goes because you've heard it a million times on lots and lots of other YouTube channels. So anyway, that was me at 13 or 14. I don't remember how old I was in 96. But anyway, it just sort of went from there. And like I eventually, we stopped hanging out, and you know, all of this stuff happens in a couple of months. That kind of enthusiasm where you want to read all the books. And Teen Witch came out in 1998, so we're right on the cusp of Teen Witch. And To Ride a Silver Broomstick, I think, was already out. So we had To Ride a Silver Broomstick, and eventually we had Teen Witch, and then we had the Cunningham catalog. And we sort of made things up as we went along, and it was a mess. I mean, you can imagine. You've heard the story. And I pulled back from it. It was something that I started to do privately, and I think the interest faded for the other girls, and like I said, one of them totally stopped talking to us. But anyway, I was never in a position where I had to sort of undo any of the beliefs or traditions or any kind of indoctrination, etc., from growing up, because I just didn't have that. So all of it was very, very novel to me. I always sort of just, I thought of myself as an atheist, but I really didn't know what that was either at the time. And in my mind, atheism is kind of its own religious category. I mean, depending on how we want to define religion, but religious scholars treat it as its own tradition, just FYI. Read Richard Dawkins, you'll understand. There's the same kind of fervor. But anyway, it coincided so nicely with my interest in environmentalism and then my interest in things like folk magic and folklore. So it was a very natural progression. And what's funny is I grew up in DC, and the combination of growing up in DC and then growing up in a very, very secular household with an extremely liberal, socially liberal parents, and in a socially liberal private school setting, there was never any need to hide anything that I was reading or doing or whatever. I remember in middle school putting on a skit at the school's holiday extravaganza or whatever that crap is. You know, they do that thing in December where it's really a Christmas party, but you have to call it a holiday party, and then like they get the black kid to sing the song about Kwanzaa, and then like there's a menorah kind of on the wall over there, but it's mostly just the big Christmas tree, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I remember, maybe it was 9th grade, but I wrote a little skit about the Holly King and the Oak King, and I bullied a couple of other kids into doing it with me, and it was really, really embarrassing. But that was just the kind of crap that I did. And anyway, I was never closeted. So when I got to college, when I became an adult, and I started meeting other pagans, and people started talking about this thing called the broom closet, which was very, very confusing to me, because I'd never been anywhere where it wasn't okay to be open. And I still haven't, okay? I live in North Carolina. My parents have since moved to Alabama. I've never been closeted ever. And I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. But anyway, it's never been in my nature, and I've never seen a need for it, and I've never experienced any kind of backlash for it. And I wonder if that's just because I don't care. But anyway, this is too long. But all this to say that my upbringing was purely secular. I'm grateful for it because it gave me the space to pursue things on my own, and has also been a great help, I think, in my professional work and academic studies. And it's made my path through the craft a lot easier because, I don't know, like there haven't been the same sort of hang-ups that I find that a lot of seekers have, that I think stem from certain kinds of religious upbringings. So anyway, if you've watched all 11 and something minutes of this, yay for you. I'll try to keep it down next time. Sorry, I go on these tangents. Anyway, I think that is all. I will see you next Thursday.